So basically for this year, I'm going to first briefly talk about the general conclusion, and then we are going to use this explain this conclusion and use this conclusion to further explain the score that the people taking COMC should have. So basically, let's start with A1 to A4. The A1 of A4 does not change too much difficulty. It's just regular. B1 to B4. Difficulty ranges. And then we specifically explain each of them. B1 is a bit harder. I mean, it's a bit ambiguous, not harder. Because according to my teacher, there might be two types of answers, 1/2 or 2/3. Those two answers are all possible. Therefore, due to the ambiguity of this problem, it is highly possible that the distribution of this problem may lead to a bad result, which is 640 or 730 is also possible. So this problem is a problem that might affect the score of the, what's that called? The CMO qualifier. B2 is difficulty actually doesn't change a lot. I mean, it's a bit harder, but it won't hurt that much. It's just a small bit compared to the 2020 and 2019. B3. B3 is still going to be a bit harder than the previous 2 years B3s. Because previous B3 can be easily solved in some simple concepts, while this problem involved in, I think, ratios and similar triangles. So this year's B3 is going to be a bit difficult. B4, the difficulty does not change compared to the previous years. So therefore, I will say overall B1 or to B4 is a bit harder than on the previous years. Now let's talk about the C1 to C4. Starting with C4. C4 is, I think it does not change that much. The only difference is, in the past years, most students can get C4A right. However, in this year, it's pretty hard because C4 is a pretty complex series problems. I think that it's hard for students to get a high, to just, for the middle level students to try to get 4A. Now let's talk about C3. C3 is going to be, ABC is actually easier than the previous years. However, D is a problem that is harder where most people can't solve. So therefore, we can draw a conclusion that ABC is easier, D is harder. And C may be also probability not easy problem because C is a proving problem. I don't mean that proving problems are difficult, but it's just some people, when they see the proving problem, they just won't try it. They will think that it's difficult. C2. It is harder than the previous years, especially the 2020-2019. I will say that for any years before 2018, except 2018 and 2017, C2 is hard. C2 is definitely difficult. Because C2, it requires some pretty brilliant thinking in order to solve it. C1 is difficult, does not change much, except there is a hidden bug. What's that? Do any of you remember that the formula for it is y squared is equal to x, right? So it's y root x. Therefore, this part is not defined. So therefore, this arrow may cause some people to get wrong. So therefore, I will say that the C4 is a bit difficult. C3 is a bit easier. C2 is much difficult. C1 stays normal. let's start to prove why those are true after we have discussed about the conclusion. So basically, let's first look at A1 first. A1, it is a pretty easy problem. You can solve it easily by difference of squares. It is easy compared to the 2020's A1, which is, it has no significant difference of difficulty compared to A1, which can be easily solved through doing an equation, and A1 in 2019, which can be solved through just simply listing out. Yeah, therefore they don't actually have a pretty large difficulty. I would think that the students' performance on A1 will still be similar compared to the previous years. So now let's look at B2. A first eats 1/5, then eats 1/2 on the next day and eats 1/2 on the third day. And he asks you what percent of candies he eat at the fourth day. This problem is similar to A2 in 2019, where it can be solved by simply brute force. It is also easier than 2019, where it can be solved by also brute force and easy inequalities of triangle. For problem C, I believe that there is not too much difference comparing it with the previous 2 years. This year's problem is requiring us to find the number of dots, integer dots, in the overlapping area, which can be solved easily compared to the previous 2 years. And the previous 2 years is also easy, so they are similar to C4. Therefore, we can draw an easy conclusion. The difficulty of Part A in 2021 is similar to the one in 2020 and 2019, and also similar for all years. So basically, let's look at this problem. I would say that this problem is relatively easy. However, it is pretty easy to overcomplicate this problem and get a different answer. Let's use my school as an example. After the test, we divide the answer into 2 teams, like one of them saying it's 1/2 and the other saying it's 2/3. Why would that happen? Because some people will think, like one dice, it has 6 possibilities. 2, 2, 2, 4, 4, 4, right? The other, it has 3, 2, 2, 2. So therefore, this incorrect weighting would cause it to have some different answer. This is a pretty important factor because it will affect the score of top 50 cutoff and the CMO QR cutoff. Now, let's look at this problem. This problem we find that it definitely can be easily solved through the listing out an equation and easily solved. This problem is just like a joke. Therefore, we can draw a conclusion. The B1 is a bit difficult compared to 2020 and it might be an important factor impacting the CMO qualification line. Now let's look at the B2 of COMC. For this problem, some people will not have any idea, but once you get an idea, it will be pretty easy. All you need to do is just find the grouping that can satisfy x 2021. In this case, it's 2021 x to the power of 2021 to x. To the last one, which is 1. And then 2020 x to the power of 2020 times negative x, and so on and so forth. One common mistake that people will make is that they fail to recognize that x 2021 is also a part of them. So this may cause some of the people for their marks deduction. That is going to be important. Compared to this year's problem, this problem is easy. It can be brute force like via a little bit of easy probability. I will mostly agree that it has a difficulty similar to 2019. Now let's start with B3. B3 is just a geometric problem. I'm going to tell you the basic solution for it. The solution of it is just to use ratio, solving systems of equations, and then similar triangles. A combination of these things, along with some complementary counting, will give you the correct results. This problem may seem hard initially. However, try connecting QOR02 and O2O1, and you will find a result. And try using the Pythagorean theorem. Then you will easily find the result. This problem is not hard as you think, trust me. At least it's less difficult than that one. Now let's look at this problem. This problem can be solved using looking at the lengths of OB and OC. However, compared to the previous problem, this problem may severely affect the score of the average score of 50 and 75 percentile, because this graph seems complex and many people will just simply give up it initially as soon as they see the graph. Therefore, this will definitely affect the 50 and 75 percentile at that year, which is 2020. For this problem, I think it's similar to C2 in the previous year, where the seeming complex problem making many people who hadn't studied the trigonometry equations quit. However, for people who study the trigonometry equation and have the ability to connect the graph, it's going to be an important help for them, and thus they will solve it. I think people who can solve this problem must, have an about pre-calculus 12 skill. Despite this, I will still think that this problem is a slight bit easier than the problem in the previous 2 years. Both the problems in 2020 and 2019 require rigorous calculation, which means you need a pretty precise calculation in order to get the problem right, which is significantly harder than a boom of idea and then this problem is done. So basically they are hard in different ways, but the way of difficulty in calculating rigorously is difficult than the difficulty of calculating having a booming idea. Conclusion 4. B4 is slightly easier than the previous 2 years, and I would like to comment on an overall difficulty. The first 3 difficulties are harder and the fourth one is a bit easier. Therefore, I will say that the overall difficulty for the COMC B part of this year is harder. So basically for C1, let's look at the C1 in 2020 and 2019 first. Problem 1 and 2 are just easy and can be solved through graphing. However, problem 3 may involve in casework, which the difficulty is similar to the one in the 2021. Therefore, I will say the difficulty of it in 2021 is similar to the one in 2020. So basically, just a recap to the 2021's problem. 2021 is basically asking you given certain lines and require you to find the which lines is not perpendicular, parallel. So for problem 1, it is required you to ask to find parallelogram, which is easy. For B and C, it's just asking you to find the lines, which is parallel. Therefore, I will think that C1 is a bit difficult and it has some tricks. However, it is still still similar compared to the one in 2020 and 2019. Ding! So basically, this is the COMC problem in this year. This problem I would think is somewhat harder than the previous 2 years. Look at this problem. Problem 1 is still a relatively easy problem because it can be proved easily by dividing the graph. Problem 2, I think, is a bit difficult because you need a pretty good way of taking out this and this so that it can be work, which is going to be pretty difficult. Problem 3, we are required to find the maximum sum. It is also going to be difficult because 7 times 7 is an odd number, so this means that there must be an outermost shell that cannot be factored using the rule of the problem 1. So basically, I would think that this problem is a pretty difficult problem compared to the previous C2. And to be honest, compared to this problem, like the B2 third problem is much easier, right? Much harder, right? Much harder. Conclusion 4. So basically, let's look at the C3. This problem is a circle problem. It is occurred in the Cayley 22 in some years. So I don't think that this problem is pretty difficult. And also this problem has a pattern. So therefore I think this problem is similar to this year's problem. However, compared to the 2020, 2019 is more difficult. This problem, it requires a hard intuitive thinking. A is relatively easy, but B and C are hard. People can solve B, definitely can solve C, but people can't solve B, definitely can't solve C. Therefore, this problem is going to be an important factor that's going to impact the situation of that year. Conclusion 8. And for P4, I'm just directly start with conclusion. The C4's problem 1 is difficult compared to the previous 2 years, but C2, C3 is normal. So therefore, the impact of C4-1, like some people would just only do the first problem, but now they can't. This will impact the CMO qualifying score a bit. As I have told before, the B part is a bit harder than previous years. Therefore, the 70 percentile and the 50 percentile should be a bit lower. For the 25 percentile as the A part and the B1 does not change much, the 25 percentile should remain the same. Here is my prediction to CMO QR and CMO score. This is because that the CMO QR may impacted by some of the early C problem and the late B problem, but CMO won't because top 50 they can definitely do those problems. So therefore, I would think that CMO QR should be a bit lower, which is 60 or 59 compared to the previous year, while CMO itself should be higher, which is 67.